In the bustling heart of Harare, Zimbabwe, a quiet revolution was unfolding, one that threatened to rewrite the very foundation of global transportation. It began with a man who had long been overlooked by mainstream science and ignored by corporate giants, yet he carried within him an idea so bold, so unimaginable, that even seasoned engineers dismissed it as impossible. Maxwell Chikumbutso was no stranger to skepticism, but he had grown used to it. For years, his inventions had raised eyebrows and sparked heated debates, yet this time, what he had created was so extraordinary that it could no longer be brushed aside. On a bright morning, journalists, engineers, and investors gathered at a dusty field on the edge of the city. A large, sleek electric bus stood parked at the center, its polished surface gleaming under the sun. There were no charging cables attached, no fuel tanks hidden beneath, and no visible source of power to explain what everyone was about to witness. The crowd buzzed with questions. How could a bus of this size, capable of carrying dozens of passengers, operate without a single drop of fuel or a conventional battery pack? Some whispered that it was a publicity stunt, others that it was a trick. Yet Maxwell stood calm, almost serene, his hand resting on the side of the machine that would either prove him a visionary or brand him a fraud forever. With a nod, he motioned to the driver. The ignition was engaged. Silence. The bus, unlike traditional combustion engines, gave no roar, no rumble, just a faint, almost imperceptible hum. Then, as though awakened by an invisible force, the massive vehicle began to glide forward smoothly, effortlessly, as if carried by the air itself. The crowd gasped. Cameras clicked furiously. Engineers rushed closer, their notebooks ready, desperate to capture any detail of how this was possible. The bus picked up speed, circling the field with astonishing grace, each lap a defiance of physics as the world understood it. For Maxwell, this was more than just a demonstration. It was proof that Africa could be the birthplace of a technological breakthrough that had eluded some of the most advanced research facilities in the West. The energy powering the bus came not from oil fields or lithium mines, but from the very fabric of the environment, a system that harvested what was freely available yet untapped. He called it a self-sustaining power unit, a mechanism that seemed to blur the line between science and miracle. Skeptics demanded schematics, demanded equations, demanded to see inside the black box of his invention. But Maxwell simply smiled, knowing that what they had just witnessed was enough to ignite imaginations across the globe. And as the bus rolled to a stop before the stunned crowd, applause broke out. Not the polite clapping of curiosity, but the thunderous roar of people who realized they were standing at the edge of history. Investors who had once scoffed now scrambled to shake Maxwell's hand. Journalists rushed to broadcast the footage. And yet, amidst the frenzy, one lingering question remained. How long before the giants of the energy industry tried to silence him, just as so many others had been silenced before? The bus demonstration in Harare spread like wildfire across international news. Within hours, clips of the silent giant gliding across the dusty field were circulating online, sparking debates that reached universities, corporate boardrooms, and government offices. Some dismissed it as clever editing, others as a hoax designed to stir attention, but the sheer number of eyewitnesses, journalists, scientists, and foreign observers made it impossible to ignore. Soon, Maxwell was invited to take his bus beyond Zimbabwe. Pressure mounted from all directions. African leaders urging him to showcase the technology as a symbol of continental innovation, and global investors desperate to be the first to stake a claim on what could be the death blow to oil dependence. After weeks of negotiations, a deal was struck. Maxwell's bus would be shipped overseas for its first international road test on American soil. When the cargo vessel carrying the bus arrived at a U.S. port, the event resembled the arrival of a spacecraft more than a vehicle. Reporters crowded the docks, drones hovered overhead, and skeptics waited with folded arms. The idea of a fuel-less bus roaming the streets of one of the world's most industrialized nations seemed too absurd to take seriously. Yet, there it was, being carefully unloaded, its metallic body catching the morning sun. The U.S. Department of Transportation, under pressure from both curiosity and suspicion, arranged a controlled demonstration. Engineers from MIT and Stanford were flown in. Representatives of major car companies sat in silence, their expressions guarded. Oil lobbyists whispered in corners, already calculating the fallout if this technology proved real. Maxwell himself, dressed in his modest suit, looked strikingly out of place among the suits worth thousands of dollars, yet his calm demeanor unsettled even the most confident critics. The moment arrived. On an open highway just outside Washington, D.C., Maxwell's bus was lined up, its seats filled with volunteers, students, professors, journalists. No fuel tank, no charging cables, no backup batteries. Just the self-powered system hidden deep inside its core. The driver turned the key. The hum returned, faint but steady. The bus rolled forward. At first, the spectators said nothing, waiting for the moment it would stall, for the embarrassment that would confirm their doubts. But the bus didn't stall. It accelerated. Smoothly, silently, it gained speed, merging onto the highway where curious drivers alongside craned their necks to glimpse the machine that seemed to glide without effort. Mile after mile, it drove, its power unwavering, its energy source still a mystery. By the time the bus completed its 30-mile demonstration loop, the silence among the experts had turned into stunned disbelief. The data collected by their instruments didn't align with anything known in energy science. No external input, no measurable fuel consumption, and yet the vehicle maintained performance as if it were plugged into an infinite power supply. Maxwell stepped forward, not with arrogance, but with the quiet confidence of a man who had always known this day would come. Cameras swarmed him, microphones shoved in his face, questions shouted over one another. How did it work? Could it scale? Was this the end of fossil fuels? He gave no technical diagrams, no blueprints, only the undeniable truth of the demonstration they had just witnessed. But as night fell, behind the awe and applause, something darker stirred. Phone calls were made in shadowed offices. Meetings were scheduled behind closed doors. To some, Maxwell was not a hero, he was a threat. And history had shown again and again what happens when revolutionary ideas clash with trillion-dollar empires. The next morning, headlines blared across the world: fuel-free bus shocks America, Africa's genius redefines transportation, and the end of oil. The internet was flooded with footage of the bus moving smoothly along American highways. Millions watched in awe, while others called it staged, demanding proof. But in the heart of Washington, meetings were unfolding that Maxwell wasn't invited to. Oil magnates, automaker executives, and energy lobbyists gathered in private chambers. Their businesses, worth trillions, were suddenly staring down an invention that could render them irrelevant. One senator, visibly shaken, whispered to the room, "If this goes unchecked, our entire economy will collapse." The mood wasn't awe, it was fear. Meanwhile, Maxwell received invitations to speak at universities and tech forums. Students chanted his name. Innovators compared him to Nikola Tesla, suggesting he had finally accomplished what Tesla had only dreamed of: unlimited, clean power. But even as applause followed him, so did surveillance. He began to notice unfamiliar cars trailing him, men in dark suits appearing at every event, their eyes cold and calculating. On the third day of his U.S. visit, Maxwell was approached by a group of investors offering billions for his patents. They promised global manufacturing, fast adoption, and his name etched in history. But the fine print revealed something sinister: exclusive control, with no guarantee his technology would ever reach the people. He pushed the papers back across the table and quietly said, "The world needs this, not just your shareholders." That refusal made him dangerous. Late that night, as he returned to his hotel, his phone buzzed with a message from a trusted engineer back in Zimbabwe. "Max, be careful. We intercepted chatter. They don't want you going home with that bus." The realization hit him: this wasn't just about recognition anymore. His life, his invention, and Africa's chance to lead the world in a new energy era were all under threat. Still, Maxwell wasn't the type to surrender. Instead, he reached out to a handful of allies, scientists, activists, and journalists, who believed in open technology. If powerful forces wanted to bury his discovery, he would make it unburyable. Plans began forming to release his designs worldwide, a digital leak that no corporation could contain. But time was short. The forces aligned against him were moving faster, and the silent war for the future of energy had already begun. The leak was his only shield. Maxwell sat in a dimly lit room with his laptop open, files of blueprints and schematics ready to be unleashed. Every detail of his self-powered engine, down to the tiniest circuit, was there. He knew that once released, it would spread like wildfire, impossible to erase. But the risk was enormous. If the wrong people got to it first, they could twist the technology, weaponize it, or worse, hide it forever. His allies debated fiercely. Some urged caution, warning that premature release could lead to chaos. Others argued the world had waited long enough, and that suppression was inevitable unless the knowledge was set free. Maxwell listened quietly before speaking. "I didn't build this to make myself rich. I built it because our children deserve a future. If I fall, let the idea live." That night, a coded packet of data began its journey across encrypted networks, hopping from server to server, until activists, engineers, and independent labs on every continent had a copy. Within hours, whispers of the leak hit social media. The African free energy bus designs are out. Downloads spiked. Videos surfaced of small-scale replicas being built in garages from Nairobi to New Delhi. The genie was out of the bottle. But while the world buzzed with hope, danger closed in. At dawn, black SUVs pulled up outside Maxwell's hotel. Men in tailored suits moved with the precision of trained operatives. They weren't there for a meeting. Upstairs, Maxwell's phone lit up with a single warning message: "They found you. Move now." Grabbing only a slim briefcase, he slipped out a back stairwell just as the lobby filled with men demanding his room key. On the streets of Washington, he blended into the crowd, a hunted genius carrying a vision too powerful to kill. News outlets that morning called him a fugitive, spinning stories of fraud and unverified claims. Governments issued statements downplaying his bus as a hoax. Yet, halfway across the world, in a small Kenyan workshop, a group of students had already assembled a working prototype from the leaked files. Cameras recorded as the machine hummed to life. Maxwell, watching from a hidden safe house, smiled faintly. "It's begun," he whispered. The war to silence him was in full swing, but so was the awakening of a global movement. The world had just caught a glimpse of life beyond oil, and there was no turning back. Within weeks, the leak transformed from an underground whisper into the loudest conversation on the planet. News anchors who had once laughed off Maxwell's claims were now forced to show undeniable footage. Buses in rural Africa running silently without fuel, university students in Europe replicating his coil systems, backyard engineers in South America building small generators that powered entire homes. The files had spread faster than any government agency could contain, mirrored across thousands of servers, impossible to delete. The oil markets trembled first. Prices plunged as speculation erupted. Is this the end of petroleum? Powerful lobbyists scrambled, demanding regulation, while CEOs of energy conglomerates held emergency meetings behind closed doors. Stock exchanges in New York, London, and Dubai flickered red. In Washington, Maxwell's name was now spoken in hushed tones inside the Pentagon and the White House Situation Room. Officials debated whether to brand him a criminal, a terrorist, or a revolutionary. Some argued he had destabilized global markets. Others warned that trying to stop him would ignite global outrage. "This isn't just a machine," one intelligence officer admitted. "This is a movement, and movements don't die with people." Meanwhile, in Africa, a new wave of pride swept across nations. For decades, the continent had been portrayed as dependent on foreign technologies, but now the world's most disruptive innovation had sprung from its soil. Young inventors rallied, declaring it Africa's time. Cities across Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and Zimbabwe held public demonstrations where crowds gathered to see working replicas of self-powered engines. Each gathering felt less like a protest and more like a celebration of liberation. Maxwell himself remained in the shadows, moving from safe house to safe house, aided by a network of activists, scientists, and sympathizers who believed his survival was as important as the technology itself. Rumors swirled. Some claimed he had fled to South America, others believed he was hiding in Africa, while a few whispered he was still in America, hiding in plain sight. But what no one could deny was the ripple effect. By the second month, small towns in India began running streetlights powered entirely by adapted versions of Maxwell's design. In Brazil, a mayor announced that his city buses would be retrofitted using the leaked blueprints. And in Germany, Engineers filed for a public patent that openly credited Maxwell's invention, effectively daring any corporation to claim otherwise. The world's balance of power was shifting. Nations that had long relied on oil exports faced economic collapse, while developing countries found themselves at the forefront of a new technological era. Protesters in the US marched with signs reading, "We want Maxwell's bus," and "Free the energy." The chant grew louder, "No more oil. No more lies."